Scary telling.
I awoke from my coffin, expecting the usual darkness and silence, but instead, I found myself surrounded by an eerie gray haze. As I emerged from my crypt, I realized that the sun had been blocked out by a massive explosion. My brethren had finally succeeded in their plan to create an eternal night. I stepped out into the world and saw that everything had changed. The landscape was desolate, and the air was filled with the stench of death. The radiation had mutated and killed most of the humans, leaving the remaining survivors in a state of constant agony. The ones who were still alive were barely recognizable, their bodies distorted and disfigured by the radiation. I knew that I needed to find food if I wanted to survive. I had always fed on human blood, but with the radiation, I wasn't sure if it would still be safe to consume. I set out to find human survivors, hoping that I could still feed on them. As I walked through the deserted streets, I saw humans practically glowing, perished from the brutal radiation. They were no longer viable food sources for me. I realized that I would have to find another way to sustain myself. I traveled for days, looking for any sign of human life, but all I found were the remnants of a once thriving civilization. The only sound that filled the air was the eerie silence of death. I wondered what had caused the explosion that had blocked out the sun. It took me a while to figure out that my brethren had been responsible. They had believed that our kind should be the kings of this world, and the only thing stopping us was the sun. It had taken them 50 years to bring their plan of eternal night to fruition. A mass scheme of blackmail, threats, and hypnosis. Their brilliant plan was to shoot every nuke in America to the opposite side of the planet. To them, it was genius. Blow up enough sediment into the atmosphere to block out the sun. There would be a mass migration of the remaining humans to America. They would reign as kings with endless human cattle. But they hadn't foreseen the counterstrikes. Nukes hitting all across America had killed our food supply. We were left with nothing. As I walked through the ruined cities, I realized that my brethren's plan had not only destroyed humanity, but had also destroyed the very essence of my being. I was a vampire, and without human blood, I would eventually die. The eternal night that my brethren had dreamed of had become a nightmare, and I was at the center of it all. I continued my journey, hoping that I would find a solution to my hunger. But with each passing day, my body grew weaker, and my hope began to fade. I wondered if I would be the last vampire on Earth, doomed to die a slow and painful death in this desolate world. As the days passed, my body began to suffer from the effects of the radiation. My cells constantly ripped apart and healed, causing tumors to form and forcing me to rip them out with my claws. I tried to ignore the pain, but it was becoming more and more unbearable with each passing day. My immortality had become a curse, and I was doomed to suffer for eternity. I remembered stories of my brethren who had gone mad from hunger, their minds consumed by their thirst for blood. I feared that I was heading down the same path. I continued my search for human survivors, but it was becoming more and more futile. The radiation had mutated and killed most of the humans, and the few that remained were barely recognizable as such. One day, I came across a group of humans who were still alive, but their bodies were distorted and disfigured by the radiation. They were in a state of constant agony, but they were still able to speak. I tried to feed on them, but their blood had been contaminated by the radiation. My body rejected it, and I vomited it up. I realized that I needed to find another way to sustain myself. I remembered stories of my brethren who had fed on animal blood when they couldn't find humans to feed on. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than starving to death. I began to hunt for animals, but they too had been affected by the radiation. They were either dead or mutated beyond recognition. As the days passed, my body grew weaker and weaker. I was becoming more and more desperate. I knew that if I didn't find food soon, I would die. One day, I came across a group of humans who were still alive, but they were in a state of constant agony. Their bodies were covered in tumors, and their skin was peeling off in layers. I tried to feed on them, but their blood was contaminated by the radiation. My body rejected it, and I vomited it up. I realized that I was running out of time. I needed to find a solution to my hunger, or I would die. As I traveled through the desolate landscape, I came across a group of scientists who were studying genetic resistance to radiation. They had set up a bunker, hoping to find a way to survive in this new world. I saw them as a potential food source and entered the bunker. But what I found inside changed everything. As I entered the bunker, I could sense the presence of humans. My hunger overtook me, and I attacked the scientists, killing them all. I drank their blood until I was satiated, but it wasn't enough. I hadn't fed in a millennia, and my hunger was insatiable. As I walked through the bunker, I realized that I was trapped. The elevator required vocal recognition, and I couldn't leave without it. I was stuck in this tomb, surrounded by the corpses of the scientists I had killed. At first, I didn't care. I was content to stay in the bunker and feed on the scientists' blood. But as the days passed, I began to realize that I was not alone in the bunker. I could hear whispers and see shadows moving in the darkness. I knew that there were other creatures in the bunker, creatures that I had never seen before. They were different from me, but they were also vampires. They too had been affected by the radiation and were trapped in the bunker, just like me. At first, I thought we could coexist. We could share the scientist's blood and survive together. But as time passed, I realized that they were different from me. They were more feral, more savage. They didn't care about anything except their hunger. I tried to fight them off, but they were too strong. They outnumbered me, and they were more powerful than I had anticipated. I was forced to flee deeper into the bunker, hoping to find a way out. But there was no way out. The bunker was designed to withstand a nuclear apocalypse, and it was impenetrable. I was trapped in a tomb, surrounded by other monsters, doomed to feed on each other for eternity. As the days turned into weeks, I could feel my body weakening. The scientist's blood was no longer enough to sustain me, and I was growing weaker with each passing day. I tried to find a way out of the bunker, but it was impossible. The elevator required vocal recognition, and I didn't have it. I was doomed to spend eternity in the tomb-like bunker, surrounded by other monsters like me. I realized that my brethren's plan had not only destroyed humanity, but it also destroyed the very essence of my being. I was a monster, trapped in a bunker with other monsters, doomed to feed on each other for eternity. As I looked around at the other creatures in the bunker, I realized that we were all doomed. The eternal night that my brethren had dreamed of had become a nightmare, and we were at the center of it all. I accepted my fate and resigned myself to an eternity of suffering in the tomb-like bunker, surrounded by other monsters. I knew that I was trapped in this prison forever, destined to spend eternity feeding on my own kind. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. I was trapped in a bunker, surrounded by other monsters like me. We were all hungry, and we all knew that the only way to survive was to feed on each other. I could hear them whispering in the darkness, their voices echoing through the empty corridors of the bunker. They were hungry, and they were growing more savage with each passing day. I tried to avoid them, hiding in the shadows and keeping my distance. But I knew that it was only a matter of time before they found me. As the hunger consumed me, I began to see things that weren't there. I would catch glimpses of figures in the darkness, their eyes glowing with hunger. I could hear their whispers, their voices taunting me and tempting me to feed on them. I was losing my mind, and I knew it. The hunger was driving me mad, and I didn't know how much longer I could hold on. One day, I stumbled upon a group of survivors who had managed to escape the radiation. They were a small group, but they were alive. They were human. At first, I was hesitant. I had always fed on human blood, but I didn't know if I could still do so after being exposed to the radiation. But the hunger was too strong, and I couldn't resist. I attacked the humans, drinking their blood until I was satiated. But it wasn't enough. I needed more. As I fed on the humans, I felt something inside of me stir. It was a feeling that I hadn't felt in a long time, a feeling of warmth and satisfaction. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt alive. The hunger was still there, but it was muted, and I felt like I had control over it. I realized that I had been so consumed by my hunger that I had forgotten what it was like to feel anything else. I had forgotten what it was like to feel alive. As the days passed, I continued to feed on the humans, and I began to feel like I had a purpose again. I knew that I couldn't stay with them forever, but for now, they were my salvation. I didn't know how much longer I had before the hunger consumed me again, but for now, I was alive, and that was enough. But my happiness was short-lived. The other creatures in the bunker had caught wind of the humans, and they were hungry too. I knew that it was only a matter of time before they found us, and I didn't know if I was strong enough to fight them off. I was trapped in the bunker, surrounded by other monsters like me, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a reason to fight. I had found something worth living for, and I wasn't going to let it go without a fight. As I fed on the humans, I knew that it was only a matter of time before the other creatures in the bunker found us. They were hungry, and they were growing more savage with each passing day. I knew that I needed to protect the humans, but I didn't know how. The other creatures were stronger and more savage than I was. I didn't know if I was strong enough to fight them off. But I had found something worth living for, and I wasn't going to let it go without a fight. I had to protect the humans, no matter what it took. I began to prepare for the fight of my life. I sharpened my claws and fangs, and I trained myself to fight like I had never fought before. The other creatures in the bunker were growing more and more restless. They could smell the humans, and they were getting closer. And then it happened. They attacked. The battle was fierce, and it lasted for what felt like hours. I fought with everything I had, but I was outnumbered and outmatched. But I had something that the other creatures didn't. I had a reason to fight. I had something worth living for. And that was enough. I fought until I couldn't fight anymore, until my body was battered and bruised, and my fangs were chipped and broken. And then it was over. The other creatures were dead, and I was the only one left standing. I looked around at the carnage, at the bodies of the creatures I had once called my brethren, and I knew that I had made the right choice. I had found something worth living for, and I had fought to protect it. And now, I was the only one left. I knew that I couldn't stay in the bunker forever. I needed to find a way out, to find a way to escape the eternal night that had become my existence. I gathered the humans, and together, we searched for a way out. We combed through the bunker, looking for any sign of a way out. And then, we found it. A secret passageway that led to the surface. It was risky, but we had no other choice. We emerged from the bunker, and I was blinded by the light of the sun. It had been so long since I had seen it, and it was almost too much to bear. But I knew that I couldn't stay in the sun for long. My body wasn't used to it, and I could feel myself growing weaker by the second. We made our way to a nearby town, and we were greeted by the few remaining humans. They were shocked to see us, but they welcomed us with open arms. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt like I was home. I had found a place where I belonged, a place where I could be alive. And I knew that I had the humans to thank for it. They had saved me, and I knew that I owed them a debt that I could never repay. But for now, I was alive, and that was enough. The eternal night had become a nightmare, but I had fought my way through it. And now, I was ready for whatever the future held.